And the mayor, he wants to get your vote. What do you do when he comes? Line 66, he says, or 60, 67. And when the mayor comes to get my vote, tell him, when are you going to stop people killing whales? Now, these days, environmentalism, don't kill the whales, etc., that's kind of normal. That is the cliche. But back in that day, it wouldn't have been. It would have been very unusual. And again, he's being very unusual. Another thing that happened back in that time was that you usually didn't buy your milk at the supermarket. They didn't have a lot of supermarkets, actually. That's a whole nother interesting story. You had the milkmen. Milkmen, they delivered the milk each morning in a glass bottle. They took away the empties. You put the empties on your porch. He took the empties, put some new ones there. And I remember that as a kid. That's how we got our milk. And so he says in line 69, and when the milkman comes, leave him a note in the bottle, the empty bottle. Penguin dust. Bring me penguin dust. I want penguin dust. So there's another one of those kind of irrational kind of what does it mean kind of expression. And he wants penguin dust. He's a disruptor. He disrupts the normal suburban lifestyle and cliches, activities, etc. So again, he tries on the situation. It doesn't quite fit. Line 72. Yet, if I should get married and it's Connecticut and snow, and she gives birth to a child, and I'm sleepless, worn, up for nights, head bowed against a quiet window, the past behind me, finding myself in the most common of situations, a trembling man. Yes, and that is a cliche, and true today. When you have that child, that first baby, you'll understand this cliche pretty strongly. I remember the first time I had kids, or every time I had kids, but the first time, I'm not going to the beach today. I'm not going running on the beach. I'm not going for a swim. I'm not doing this and that. We have other responsibilities, and that's typically what happens here. And you get woken up to that right away. No more sleeping till noon, I can tell you that. And he says, finding myself in the most common of situations, a trembling man, knowledged with responsibility, not twig smear, not Roman coin soup. So there's a couple more expressions. Twig smear, Roman coin soup, and I don't know what to do with them, actually. I know that the Romans, one of their practices when someone died was to put coins over their eyes. Twig smear, I mean, you might have to use your imagination, but regardless, even if we can make some actual cultural, societal references there, they're still kind of irrational expressions. And you can take them for what they are. A lot of people writing about this poem, they try to figure it out like pieces of a puzzle, but you never quite get there. But maybe that's not the point. And he says, oh, what would that be like? So now he imagines the baby. Surely I'd give it for a nipple, a rubber Tacitus. Now, nipple means like pacifier, and you all know what pacifiers are. And Tacitus was a Roman historian. If you look down at the references down below, on the footnote, that's kind of an intellectual thing. A rubber Tacitus. For a rattle, and babies like rattles, a bag of broken Bach records. Johann Sebastian Bach and a classical composer, kind of an intellectual thing there as well. Tec della Francisca, all over his crib. So you got these pictures that not the normal kind of, flowers and maybe a starburst or whatever that you might put on a baby's crib. Della Francesca. And how about the ABCs? Are you going to put the ABCs on his bib, the kind of normal thing? No, the Greek alphabet on the bib. And what about a playpen? The Parthenon. Now, you can look up on Google a picture of the Parthenon. That's that famous building in Athens that from back in the Greek times, you would recognize it immediately. I mean, I guess I could call it up. Let me go ahead and call it up. I think some of you may be a little bit unclear about that. Oops, can't type today, as usual. Can't type. There it is, Parthenon. Let's get an image of the Parthenon. There you are. So I think probably from your history book or from postcards, etc., you may have seen a picture of this most famous building. So he's going to make a playpen out of a Parthenon. So all these are kind of intellectual things that your average person may not be aware of, but that's the kind of father he'd make. Let me go back to the poem. So he tried that on. Nah, he says, I don't fit. Line 84. No, I doubt I'd be that kind of father. Not rural, not snow, no quiet window, but hot, smelly New York City, 7 flights up, roaches and rats in the walls, a fat Reichian wife screeching over potatoes, get a job. Now, back in the 50s, air conditioning, there wasn't a lot of it. There was some. It was just getting started, really. And if you've ever been in New York City on a hot summer day without air conditioning, it's pretty bad. It's worse than a 100-degree day here in Texas. It really is. And so imagine the people, trying to sleep at night in that kind of environment. There's a famous movie called Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock movie with Jimmy Stewart. That's a great one to stream, by the way, on Netflix. Rear Window. I think you'd really like it. But you'll see people trying to sleep in a hot New York City night without air conditioning in that show. It really brings home the point. But in any case, he's in kind of a tenement building. It's not very elegant or nice, and you can see roaches and rats in the wall, fat Reichian wife screeching over potatoes, get a job, and 5 nose-running brats in love with Batman, and all the neighbors all toothless and dry-haired like those hag masses of the 18th century, all wanting to come in and watch TV. And that's because, of course, back in the 50s, TV was just kind of getting going and not everybody had a TV. And so I can remember a couple of times, I think we had some neighbors, I was very young, come in and watch some special event or program on TV in our house. Of course, what else? The landlord wants his rent, line 93. And the grocery store, you got grocery bills. Blue Cross, that's medical insurance. Gas and electric, Knights of Columbus. Knights of Columbus is a charitable organization. Impossible to lie back and dream telephone snow, ghost parking. So there are more of those expressions, telephone snow and ghost parking. He doesn't have time, too much pressure. The kids and the wife and the bills, impossible. 96, line 96, no, I should not get married. I should never get married. But imagine if I were to marry a beautiful, sophisticated woman, tall and pale and wearing an elegant black dress and long black gloves, holding a cigarette holder in one hand and a highball in the other. And a highball, by the way, is a very typical drink. Back in that time, I know when my parents gave parties, they served highballs pretty much most of the time. And so this imaginary wife is holding a cigarette holder in one hand and a highball in the other, and we lived high up in a penthouse with a huge window from which we could see all of New York and even farther on clearer days. No, I can't imagine myself married to that pleasant prison dream. It is almost like a cliche. I'm sure I've seen this scene in some advertisement in some magazine where it's for a cigarette or some kind of alcohol or something that they're advertising. It's very much a cliche. And he calls it a pleasant prison dream. So the rich woman, the poor woman, doesn't matter. He just doesn't fit. But now we seem to get a little more serious. He says, but what about love? I forget love, not that I'm incapable of love. It's just that I see love as odd as wearing shoes, and yes, the beat poets often tried to project this image of going barefoot. I never wanted to marry a girl who was like my mother, and Ingrid Bergman was always impossible. Now, Ingrid Bergman was, one of the most famous actresses in the world at that time, considered one of the most beautiful women. Maybe she was the most famous actress, so she was highly desirable. But as he says, and Ingrid Bergman was always impossible. And there's maybe a girl now, but she's already married. And I don't like men, but there's got to be somebody. Because what if I'm 60 years old and not married, all alone in a furnished room with pee stains on my underwear, and everybody else is married? All the universe is married but me. And so then we end the poem. We can see it's kind of on getting a little more serious, because what's the alternative to getting married? You know, you're not going to have love. You're not going to have those human connections in the same way that you normally would. And he says here, at the end, the last 4 lines, and yet, well, I know that were a woman possible, as I am possible, then marriage would be possible. And now we have another reference, and there is a note in your copy at the bottom. It refers to a novel by, I think his last name is Haggard. I think his first name is H. Rider Haggard. I think that's it. And this was a novel he wrote called She. And in the novel, there's this woman who's bathed in a pillar of flame. And she doesn't age. And so she can live for as long as necessary, and she's waiting for her lover to come back. But can you say she's truly living? And he says, I'm like she, in her lonely alien God. Now God means G-A-U-D, means clothing. Waiting her Egyptian lover. So I wait, bereft of 2,000 years in the bath of life. Let's talk about that for a minute. The key word there is bereft. Well, that's one of the key words. And bereft means lacking, missing, and you need whatever it is you're missing. And what is he missing? What is he lacking? He says 2,000 years in the bath of life. Now that 2,000 years refers to the civilization since the birth of Christ. And we often look at that 2,000 years as really the development of modern civilization happens during that time. And again, marriage is the foundation for that civilization. And if you don't get married, all of the values and cliches, the rituals, all that stuff, you don't have it. You're not part of it. In a way, you're not living out who you were meant to be. And as he calls it, you're missing the bath of life. It's messy, it's absurd, it's ridiculous, but that's what it's all about. And if he doesn't get married, he'll be missing that. So you can see it ends on a kind of a serious note. What's the alternative? Now, maybe he still would choose not to, because he has to find that woman who's possible like he is, I guess, who shares the same values. So we have this kind of a little serious note on this humorous poem. But it's a great poem to write on. There's a lot of things you could say and a lot of ways you could organize the material. But there will be a question or two on the final exam. You don't have to do this poem, but if you want to, you can. So I'll see you guys at the final.